Europe they had Game Boy Color support. So this is in the US it was Nemesis, the first game. Castlevania Adventure, the first one. Konami Racing, which I don't remember what that was called in the US. Motocross Maniacs is on the later platforms, and Probotector, which was Operation Siege. Super loud, and no matter how much I turn it down in OBS, it's still really loud, so I'm just turning it off. There we go. That's weird. Let's see if that helps. Okay, that seems like it sounds better from what I'm seeing in the chat. Except now the images. There we go. Wow. Okay. Okay. Core says they don't have Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. No, Teenage Mutant. None of the there are no licensed games across the 4 of these collections. So I now have 3 of these. I have 3 except for 1, but the British versions are cool because they added Game Boy Color support. So these games were these are all black and white games, and the Japanese versions are still black and white, but they have Super Game Boy support in Japan. So again, it was loud at the beginning, so maybe you didn't hear me. There's 4 of these collections, 4 games each. I have the first 3. I don't have the 4th one yet, and they all added color for the European versions, which is good because they're also in English. And yeah, the Japanese ones had Super Game Boy support, so they had like a custom banner for the Super Game Boy, but not full color like this, which I prefer. I also prefer the games being in English. So, for example, there's a Goemon game on one of these, and apparently the only way to play the game in English is on this collection, the European version of this. Not this collection, but I think it's volume 3. So, yeah. So I dig these. I dig the color support. More than the backgrounds apparently have Tokimeki Memorial characters on the Super Game Boy, but I like the color palettes better. And apparently Castlevania Adventure at least runs a little faster than the actual original black and white Game Boy version, which is good because Christopher Belmont walks so slow in that. Wendy Turnbuckle says woot in the chat. Hi, Wendy. Yeah, I don't want that. Yeah, so the version of Castlevania Adventure here is better than the original black and white Game Boy release. No, son of a bitch. but probably not as good as the Wii version, Castlevania Adventure Rebirth, which is my preferred way to play that game. So yeah, so what's weird about this game is Core says, too bad it wasn't Belmont's Revenge. Belmont's Revenge is on the fourth game in this series. So Belmont's Revenge is here, not here on this cartridge, but in this part of the series. It's on the fourth one, which is the only one I do not have. But Belmont's Revenge is part of this series. Let's see. Wendy Turnbuck asked if I prefer the GBA SP. I prefer it to. I prefer the GBA SP to a standard GBA. Is the answer to that question? I am not a huge handheld guy. I own a bunch of handhelds, and I'm dead. I own a bunch of handhelds, but don't play them a ton. So I have a DS Lite, and I have a PSP, and I have a 3DS, and I have a couple of black and white Game Boys, and I have I have all that stuff. But wow, that was terrible. But I just don't do a lot of handheld gaming, to be honest. I do a lot when I travel. I travel for work, and I play 3DS a lot. Like, I've been working my way through Phoenix Wright versus Professor Layton on work trips lately. But generally, like, when I'm at home, I almost never play portable systems, and so I really like having this Game Boy player, because all my Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games, I usually play them here or on my Super Game Boy. Although the Super Game Boy, the processor or the coprocessor or whatever in the Super Game Boy plays games back at a faster speed than they should play, but it's like 2.6%, I guess, or something like that, faster than they're supposed to play. But for games like Donkey Kong, which have like the custom borders and stuff, I do like to play them on that. I want to pick up a oh, that's the homing gun. I want to pick up a Super Game Boy 2, which was only released in Japan, but corrects the speed issue, as does the Game Boy player. This is what you're seeing is playing at the correct speed, and has Game Boy Color support, obviously, which is why I'm playing this game on it. Yeah, so I do prefer the GBSP. I actually don't have a GBASP though. Like I said, I'm not a huge handheld gamer. I actually play, if I'm playing a GBA game on an actual handheld, I'm going to do it on my DS Lite, is how I'm going to do that. One handheld system I actually do love a lot, especially because there's not really a way to play any of the games for it on without using an emulator. Off a handheld is the Neo Geo Pocket. I have a Neo Geo Pocket Color, and I love that thing. I actually take it with me just about everywhere I go. It's always in my backpack. And that thing just has some really fantastic games. Which is definitely something to be talking about tonight, since we are going to be playing some Neo Geo games if Mike ever actually shows up. So yeah. Let's see. Core says it supports 2-player also. I'm not sure what that reference was to. Poverty Game Net says NGPC for life. And yes, much like the New World Order, once you go for Neo Geo Pocket Color, you're Neo Geo Pocket Color for life. And again, those games are really not playable in any other way except with an emulator, and I guess a lot of games play okay in some of those emulators. The only real experience I have with Neo Geo Pocket emulation was when I made the ugh, that was terrible. When I made the Big Bang Pro Wrestling video, the Obscure Games WrestleMania special last year, there's no way to capture footage from a Neo Geo Pocket that isn't a gigantic pain in the ass. So, because it doesn't have a backlit, it doesn't have a lit screen without a mod. So even like it's way more trouble than it's worth. So I used an emulator to capture the game footage for that, even though I do own the game, and it ran like just total garbage. It ran at like half speed. Speaking of total garbage, so I just didn't. I couldn't do it. I mean, I did it, and insofar as I got the footage I needed, and that was it. But fortunately, for like a 6-minute video, you don't need a ton of footage, so I didn't play very much of it. But it ran like shit, so I have not used Neo Geo Pocket Emulation since, and probably will not unless I am doing another video for a Neo Geo Pocket Color game. But I wish they would re-release some of that stuff on, on Virtual Console and like a 3DS Virtual Console, because there's so many great games for it that really never came out in any other format. Core Course says Super Game Boy 2. Yeah, Super Game Boy 2 had a spot for a link cable in it, so you could link up with, if somebody had a Game Boy and you wanted to play something 2 players on the Game Boy Color, you could do that. Or on the Game Boy Color, on the Game Boy Super Game Boy 2. The Game Boy Player also has a spot for a link cable. And Wendy Turnbuckle asks, do you hate this Game Boy Color like everybody else? No, I don't. I mean, I don't know. I don't think so. I am largely indifferent to it. The library isn't great. It's got a couple of cool games. The only actual Game Boy Color games I have, I think, are WWF Betrayal, which was a WayForward developed like Double Dragon style game, except with WWF wrestlers. You can play as Stone Cold or The Rock or Triple H or The Undertaker, and you have to save Stephanie McMahon from the wrestlers that you didn't choose, basically. And Metal Gear Solid Ghost Babel, as it is sometimes known, although that was not the US title. Yeah, so Jesus, I'm just playing this like shit. So yeah. It's fine. So the nice thing about this game is that it lets you just choose a level from the start. So I died on Area 2, just pick Area 2 again. There was a lot of shovelware on the Game Boy Color. It was sort of this resurgence of mostly dead platform kind of years after the fact, and I think that spurred on the cost of investment was so low that a lot of kids games kind of came out in a lot of shovelware, but that's sort of always been the MO of handheld systems, and whatever, it is what it is. But the system itself is fine. It's a fine little system. Again, I don't have any Game Boy Colors. I have a lot of games that are Game Boy and Game Boy Color compatible, like this one. This is a black cartridge. But the only Game Boy Color, only games I have, again, are Betrayal and Metal Gear. Let's see. I was trying to shoot this thing while reading the chat. Poverty Game Night says, some games had 2-player built-in for Super Game Boy. I think KOF 95 has it, but man, is that a Game Boy fighting game port? Yeah, it's Game Boy fighting game port as hell. There's a lot of really weird fighting game ports on the Game Boy, and some of them I've considered covering on Same Name Different Game, just because the concept of some of them is so weird. For example, there is a Game Boy port of Battle Arena Toshinden, which was a PlayStation launch title, that there's a Game Boy version of. Super weird. And, you know, as the SNK ones are not terrible, I guess. That's my faint praise for the night. The Game Boy ones are not terrible, or the SNK Game Boy fighting ports are not terrible, I guess. The KOF one that you're talking about, I think, is pretty bad, but there's a Fatal Fury, like a weird SD Fatal Fury game that's sort of like a precursor to the Neo Geo Pocket Fatal Fury games. SNK really killed it on their handheld. The Neo Geo Pocket fighting games all have this sort of weird SD art style, but they all work really well, in my opinion. Again, that's just a fantastic little system in general. So we're about 20 minutes in. There's still no mic, which is fine. I can keep playing the Game Boy Collection for a little while. But about halfway through, I'm going to give away the first Steam key. And then at the end of the stream, I'm going to give away the second one. So tell your friends, I guess, if you want. Or if you want the Steam keys for yourself, don't tell your friends. Maybe that's a better idea. Don't tell your friends. But do tell your friends, because I want them to come watch the stream. So we're actually going to go ahead and back out of this. And I think I want to change the game pack. I want to... okay. I want to reset the game so I can play something else, but I'm not having a lot of luck here. Is there a way to... This came with the manual, which is interesting, because the other three of these, I do not have the manual, and this manual is super thick. Starting the game. Configuration. Oh, I know why this manual is so thick, because the instructions, it's a European game, so the instructions are in many languages. Looks like German, Dutch, French, English, Italian. That's why these are so thick. But there's nothing that tells me how to actually, like, quit out of the game. So maybe I'll just have to reset the system. Reset. Poverty Game Night says, if you want, I got extra Steam keys for some stuff. Hey, man, if you want to do that, you are more than welcome to do that. Oh, hey. Mike is going to be here. I'm going to call Mike. Mike, I'm doing alright. How you doing? I'm looking for Mike also, so I can add him. So I can add Mike also. Yeah. Yeah, let's do that. So, okay, everybody, we're gonna... So, first of all, can everybody hear Mike? Well, it doesn't matter. Mike's taking over the stream. I'm gonna split. We're gonna split for a second after these messages.